Thanks everybody for joining us for episode number 2 of the Mile 99 interview series. Our Mile 99 interview series is basically a place to find out what makes our friends and runners tick. We find out how they got into running, what are they doing with their running, and how are they handling this situation. I am here in Auburn, California at the 8th station. Beer is still cold. I'm pouring really good. And the shoes haven't left. So when you guys are ready, you'll be welcome in. And I am here with Greg, my co-host. Greg?
Thanks, Paulo. So everybody, anyone that's new to this series, as Paulo said, we're just running a weekly series every Thursday night, 7 o'clock. We're going to have different ultra runners and people in the ultra running community join us and just dig in and talk about all kinds of things that we just aren't able to learn at this time. Like we exchange a lot of information out on the trails a lot of the time when we run with each other, and a lot of us have been missing that. So the idea here is to just sit down with somebody every week, find out a little bit more about them. It may be somebody that we do run with or we haven't run with before, find out what their story is, what kind of races they've been doing, what sort of training they do, and just try to just foster a sense of community here. And that's really the goal. And just try to keep our Auburn and greater Auburn and greater California community strong and get through this little temporary setback that we've got going on right now. So I just want to shout out to Mike Turner. He's got I think his video off right now, but he's in the background, and what he's doing is monitoring all the chat rooms and the Facebook comments and all that. And once we get to the live Q&A section at the end of this interview, then he'll start getting some questions in from the audience, so you can kind of post things along the way, and he'll collect those and then call on people at the end. And hopefully we'll get some good questions like we did last week. Anybody that's watching on Facebook right now, if you want to drop a comment, just say where you're watching from or say hi, that's always welcome as well. So anyway, so moving right along, tonight we have an ultra runner. Some of you, I think, know him really well. Others may not be as familiar, but in my mind, I've seen some of his accomplishments over the last few years, and I've always been super impressed with him. I think we're in the same age group now, and I look up to this guy, and he's a fast guy. He's done some incredible races, had some incredible achievements over the last couple of years, and I just really wanted to find out what makes him tick. You know, I don't know if we've actually run together before. I know we've been in some races. You've been ahead of me, maybe, and I just wanted to.
We've definitely been in the start lines together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I just wanted to find out a little bit more about him, and just hear about some of these things he's been doing the last few years. So everyone, this is Kelly Barber.
Yeah, thanks gentlemen for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you making the time. I know that I'm sure there's lots of stuff going on, but just having the time to sit down with us and spend a little time is great. So we really appreciate it. So just to give everyone a little bit of background here, Kelly's a California native, grew up in Red Bluff, more in the northern part of the state, and then went to school at UC Davis. And if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've been in Davis like ever since you graduated, generally?
Yeah, I'm one of those probably amongst many UC Davis graduates that never quite escaped from Davis. So yeah, we settled in here. I live in Woodland these days, but so I've moved all of 6 miles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad to be held in high regard as an Auburn local, because I still aspire to be up there more often. But yeah, still in the valley.
Well, and I know you're active too with the Donner Party mountain runners, right?
Yeah, I certainly got in early with them, so I can kind of work my way up the hill to find somebody to run with if they're not usually in the canyons anyway. So
right, yeah. So you got a good sized range you can draw from, it sounds like. So that's great. Yeah. So Paulo, if you want to dive into a little bit about Kelly's intro to running, perhaps.
For sure. Yes. So, Kelly, I learned that you first did a few triathlons back in the 2008 or around that time. Then eventually got your feet dirty, so to speak, getting into trail running a little bit around 2012. Well, and now it's you've done a little bit of road races, so road racing, triathlons, trail running. So you've done some cycling. Um, so what else have you done that we haven't learned so far? I know that you've helped at a different pacing groups, right? So that needs to keep you active on the road. So tell us.
Yeah, I mean, from a starting point, just to maybe go back a little bit. Yeah, I started into running fairly late. Growing up, I was more of a downhill skier. Summers I spent sailing. Was a competitive, just single hand sailor. So once I got into college, I really kind of got busy with work and just pretty much worked for 15, 20 years until I needed to get back in shape. And that was, like you were saying, around the triathlon years. As I was telling Greg earlier, that my kind of athletic career somewhat coincided with Facebook, because I was scrolling back. If you scroll back, and I think it's posted on there, the very first picture that somebody sent me on Facebook was from my 20-year high school reunion, of which I was completely horrified at how much weight I had gained from when I graduated from high school, and decided I've got to do something. I've got to get back in shape. So that translated to getting back to swimming in the pool. And so, kind of from there, swam for a couple of months, started getting a little bit more fit. And it happened that our club that I was swimming at was doing this, what they called an Ironman challenge, which was, they said, take a month and swim the distance of an Ironman, run the distance of an Ironman, and bike the distance of an Ironman. And I, thinking back on some of your questions earlier this week, I was thinking that I was probably running somewhere between like 1 mile and 3 miles on the treadmill, which was the cap of which I wanted to run at one shot. And, but got through it. And after that, decided maybe I'd take on a triathlon, and that kind of became the gateway drug to getting back into shape and to competing. So I did, Olympic triathlon up to half was the longest I ever went. And then really at that point, started moving towards trail.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've got some unfinished business in the triathlon world. Do you ever think of trying to get a full Ironman?
It's funny because I told people at the time I didn't want to take on a full Ironman because I couldn't put in the time to train for it.
Oh.
And thinking back now as to what I'm sure you're well aware of how much time we put on the trail, that probably could, but really it scares the crap out of me to bike these days. I would much rather be out on the trail, so it's pretty low on my priority list to do an Ironman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, I come from a bike racing background for many, many years. And then, yeah, I pretty much don't really ride the road anymore. It's just a little too nerve-wracking in some cases. And I don't know how the traffic is down there, but the narrow roads up here, it can be a little tough.
Yeah, we had the Mad Cow Club here in Davis that I think Dave Scott had started, and it was a much, sort of low-key group by the time I got involved with them. But in the couple of years we were there, I think we lost 2 people out of our group to road accidents, which it just totally turned me off to biking.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, and I mean, you just get out on the trails, and it's just, you don't have to worry about it. Traffic, or even if you're on your mountain bike too, though, that's also a nice option I've found occasionally, is just get on the mountain bike and don't have to worry about the cars, and just have to worry about, the odd stump sticking out somewhere.
I had my stint as a mountain biker, which was kind of hilarious. It was probably 10 years before I started running, and I would bike that. I would bike that upper Clementine loop all the time, and it just never occurred to me about running it. Oh, thanks, Paulo.
So so the question is, where are you here in this picture?
Where,
Yes.
where am I here? That would be me in the red.
Okay. Well, it's be careful what you say here at the Mile 99 interview, because if it's online, I'm gonna find it.
Oh,
Okay?
I was fairly sure you would probably find it.
Yes.
But I mean, it was certainly a driver for me saying you got to do something different. So
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of share some of the same way that I got into running. Like I used to tell people that I only ran because that's the only way I got to the finish line in a triathlon. It's like I ran because I had to, and that was the case until I found trail running. It's in back at that time. This is in my early days. Yeah, it's I remember all the amount of laundry that you're doing because you're if he because you're swimming in the morning, you're running in the afternoon, and you're cycling sometime in the evening. And preferably, you should be washing all those clothes. So, yes, I remember it is time consuming. You know, it's
yeah,
not only while exercising, but there is the packing the bike on the car, driving to the bike rides, or driving to the swims. You can, you know, unless you've got a 50-yard pool in your backyard. Yeah, it does take a lot of time to do that. Yeah, it's and I'm yes. If I happen to run into Kelly Barber from 2008, yeah, I wouldn't recognize you. It's yes, you look great. Yes. When
Agreed.
I grow up, I wanna be like you. I wanna have that beard.
yeah. Other
Trying.
people are aspiring to this stay-at-home COVID-19 beard, but the ones that haven't had it for a few years are realizing it's a little tougher, a little itchier.
Yeah, this is me. I'm like 8 months into it. Yes.
Keep it up,
Yes.
Paulo.
Thank you.
We're
Yes.
holding out for you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So going back a little bit to your like early years, childhood, you mentioned like you were into skiing, water sports, things like that. Like were those all things that your family did together, or were you sort of encouraged to go off on your own and find some of these things?
So growing up in Red Bluff, I had Mount Lassen in my backyard.
Mm.
So I actually started skiing up there first, and my dad was a fire captain, kind of at the next station that was right down below Mount Lassen. So I spent most of my childhood running around on that mountain. I actually learned how to ski first with a friend, and then my parents got into it, and then we skied as a family pretty much my probably until I went to college. But then I was a ski patrolman at Lassen for a lot of years, because sort of once I got bored with just skiing, I did that for a number of years until I went to college.
Cool. So I mean, you had that kind of athletic mindset, it sounds like, through most of your life.
Yeah, because I think I think you or Paolo had mentioned to Craig last week about sort of team sports versus individual sports, and yeah, I was never, I think I tried to play basketball once when I was in 6th grade or something, and realized that was not going to be the thing for me. So it was always, somewhat of an individual pursuit type of sports.
Yeah, that's very similar to me too. I was kind of tall for my age at the time, tried to do the basketball thing, and it just wasn't happening. But luckily enough, got into bike racing at an earlier age, so that's cool. And so up in Red Bluff, yeah, I mean, you had Lassen like pretty much right there. So, and I was just looking at the map because I'm not super familiar with that area, but it looks like it's kind of down in the valley, and you've just got forests and national forests and parks and things like all around there. So it seems like a great place to just go and have a lot of great outdoor opportunities.
It's been interesting kind of rediscovering it as a runner, because when I went back up into that area, I think after Bev Abs and Alan had stopped RDing their Wildflower 50K that they had that was along the Sacramento River. They were kind of right outside of Red Bluff. I ran up and ran that course, and it was right where I used to run around as a kid, but never thought about sort of doing a distance run. So it's a gorgeous course. It's too bad that they don't still have that race up there. And Lassen Park always strikes me as interesting because it's kind of just outside the range that most people want to drive to, but again, just gorgeous trails to run.
So attendees should take note. That could be a new destination for people in this area to go check out, it sounds like.
Always
So
quiet.
how
I rarely pass people.
Yeah, yeah.
so how far is Red Bluff from here? For those watching, maybe they can get an idea.
Probably 2 hours, 2 hours up 5 from Sacramento.
Mhm.
Perfect. Yes.
So definitely doable.
Yeah.
So if you want to avoid all the Bay Area traffic, you go to Red Bluff, and you got trails to yourself.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. So we were stalking you a little bit, and we looked at your ultrasound results. It's right, and it shows your first trail marathon distance back in 2012, your first 100-miler in 2014. You share with us what was the transition to go from the
Yeah.
marathon to the 100 miles, and not only any 100-miler, but TRT.
Yeah.
It's I remember my days when I got into trail running, and this is actually right before the ultra sign up days, I think. Yeah, I looked at TRT and I was like, who wants to do 2 loops of that? So go on, tell me.
One's during the day and one's at night. They're completely different.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Is one is alive and the other one is almost dead. Yes.
It was an interesting journey because at the point that I got into running and I had done my first marathon, my running partner at the time had looked at Grizzly Peak, which the trail marathon in Berkeley and Tilden Park, and I think she had seen that the previous year there was like, I don't know, 6 women or something that had done the trail marathon distance, and that she had a good chance of doing well at it. So she wanted to train for it. I'm like, okay, let's train for that. So neither of us knew anything about trail running. So we did our entire training plan like we were training for a road marathon, just doing short intervals, all flat. We didn't climb anything. So, my main recollection of that race was, 1, we finished, and 2, I remember being about 2 miles from the finish line and just both calves were seizing up. I think we finished in over 6 hours. And, I felt like I was doing like that military scene of go on without me, I'm not going to make it. You go ahead and get your finish time. And, she took off and finished and I got it done. But I think once I did get it done, I had spent a number of years of college, paying for college, working as a fireman and working out in the backcountry. Of course, my daughter's trying to FaceTime me. And so what I did recognize from that, the first sort of chance to be out on the trail, was just remembering what that was like, just to be out in the woods and, spend the day out there. And at that point, the pain didn't matter. I was hooked. So from that race, I think I was probably back like most people are. You get through the pain for a few hours and then you're on ultra sign up looking at what the next race is. And I was already signed up for, I think it's Coyote Ridge. That's one of the Pacific Coast races out in the headlands, because that was going to get me, at least I could check off the list that I had done an ultra, because that was going to be the first ultra on the list. So that was the gateway.
Okay.
So from there it got nuts very fast, because I had a friend living in Canada, and for some reason I got doing what for many years I would do, which is draw a circle around where I wanted to go and see where the races were. And I found Fat Dog, and I found the Fat Dog 50, because 120 was nuts at that point, but 50 was doable. So that's what became kind of the next box to check on really doing a race in the mountains. And it was really surviving that kind of gave me the impetus to think I could pull off TRT.
Yeah, and I mean that was only like a little over a year, maybe a year and some number of months after that first trail marathon. So it was a good ramp, looks like, mileage wise and difficulty wise and all of that.
Yeah, my training partner at the time said, I'm fine with helping you through 50, but if you want to go beyond that, you're nuts. So she didn't realize quite how nuts I was.
Yeah. And we'll touch on some longer distances as we get further into this. So, so as you did those jumps, like, yeah, I mean, like what was sort of like that, like the mental process you went through, the physical process, all those things. I mean, yeah, did it just seem like, okay, like I've checked this one off, I'm just going to do that next one and that next one. And how did that all work?
It's interesting that it really became a transition in why I was out there, because I think the first 50 was to figure out if I could do it. And that Fat Dog course is challenging because I went back later and I did the 120, but the way they have the way that she has the races set is the individual distances from 120 down to, I think she still has a 30-mile distance, but she brings all the start lines forward so everybody finishes together. So for the 50, the 120 milers had started the previous day, and we were starting kind of in the middle of the course, and I had 120-mile racers passing me as we were kind of queuing up in the start line. And I think that race has got, I don't know, a 4,000-foot climb right in the middle of it. And that race was probably the most sore I've ever been after any race that I've done to date. But I think it was also, in retrospect, looking back and understanding that it takes really several years to build up the endurance piece of this and build up the recovery piece of it. And, that was the first year into it, and it felt like it. So I think, if you're a new runner, it's going to hurt a lot that first year because you haven't built up sort of the cardiovascular or the vasculature into the muscles to really set you up to be able to, clear all that garbage out so that you can really be, recover faster and come back from doing those kind of hard activities.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It's like, yeah, you're sort of down at the micro level really in your muscles and your whole aerobic system and all that.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point about that. Yeah, because I mean, I know after my first 50K, like I was sore for like 4 or 5 days, and now, I mean, sometimes we go out and we just do training runs that are longer like that, and you don't feel terrible after. So yeah, I guess every year that you're doing it, every time you bump up that next level to the new race distance, you're just gonna adjust. Your body's going to adjust eventually, and then that'll become kind of like your new baseline, and then you go from there. Very cool.
And there was, now that I'm thinking about it, in between those two, there's a little bit of a wacky Western State story.
Oh, do tell.
So I think many of you know Bruce LaBelle, and I run with GVH in Davis as kind of the core group, which she also runs with. And, once I kind of finally felt I was running well enough, he mentioned this whole Western States thing to me that I had no real idea of. And for that first year, he said, hey, if you want to run some trail, you can go up and sign up as a pacer. Just, here's where to go in Forest Hill, and you just give them your name, and, you might wait around for a while, and then, they can set you up with a pacer. So, GVH has the aid station at Cal One. So I helped out at Cal One for a few hours and gone up there and signed up. And it was probably, I don't know, 6 o'clock at night. So I'm figuring, maybe about midnight, I'll get some pacing duties so I can sit around, and this is going to be a long slog to the finish line. So I had a brand new pack and brand new headlamp. I'd never run at night. And so I was standing with a friend of mine, and, we hadn't really even kind of figured things out on, they were going to stay in Auburn and I was going to run, and, all of the details. I'm maybe there for 20 minutes, and I can't remember who was coordinating at Forest Hill, comes back down and says, hey, I got a runner for you. So this guy was trying to run on 24-hour pace, and had it'd been a hot day in the canyons, and he had overdone it, and gets into Forest Hill, and he's, can you get him to the finish line under 24 hours? Sure. I mean, I knew don't get him lost and get him to the finish line. And that's all I knew. And at least it was also dedicated to the fact that, I'm not going to give up on this guy. So put my headlamp on and got him together, and we got out of there and got going. I ran him all the way to the finish line. That was the longest I'd ever run in one shot. I was probably the most chafed as I'd ever been in my life, because it was not my race at that point. I had to get him to the finish line and take care of me second. So that was a good lesson learned in definitely learning how to take care of yourself. But we didn't. I don't have we got him there in under 24 hours. I got him there in under 25 hours, and he went on to crush it at Vermont a few weeks later. But
Nice.
But yeah, it's certainly, thinking back, sorry, Bob, for what I didn't know at that point. Yeah, if only. But yeah, it certainly got me super excited about the race and super excited about trail running.
For sure. And so have you done a lot of other pacing duties since then?
Yeah, a fair amount. I think, Helen Pelster and I run quite a bit together. So I've paced her for a number of different races for I Am Tough, and seems like a couple of different races. Katie Gifford and her, and I've paced for Angela's Crest and a number of other races. So pacing seems like a nice way to at least get to see courses. So that's been a fun way, and also learning the other side of it, of what it takes to try and help get runners to the finish line.
Yeah. I mean, I've paced some people, notably Mike Turner on the call here a few times, and it's a responsibility for sure. And I can imagine, like, your first time there at Western States with that runner. I mean, it puts some pressure on you sometimes. Like, you really feel responsible.
But Kelly, did you tell your runner that it was your first time running that distance as you were pacing him, or and I'm only asking because my very first time pacing somebody at Western States, or pacing anybody anywhere, I had never run, what was it, 38 miles. It's, and of course I didn't want to tell the guy, hey, I know it a little less than you do. It's, the guy asked me, do you know the course? Yes. Have you run this section before? Yes. I had never been on it before.
I would venture a guess that it was something pretty similar to that.
Cheers to that.
I was courageous that I could get it done, and didn't know what I didn't know.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And what year was that for you?
I think that was 2012.
Okay. All right. I was trying to, mine I think may have been 2012 too, or 2011, the really cold year where there were people dropping of hypothermia.
Yeah, this was not cold.
No, this is like, I was wearing 2 jackets, gloves. It was cold. So anyways, yes, but for those of you watching, never tell the truth to your runner. Never. It's if they're moving at 14-minute mile pace, you tell them they're moving at 19-minute mile pace. You gotta pick it up, buddy. 19-minute mile, we're not gonna make it. Yes.
Here's another thing that Mike Turner can attest to, is that if you're doing TRT and they're coming around that final loop around the lake, don't tell them the finish is right there, because it's still 2 miles away.
Yes.
All those races suck where you can see the finish line from miles out.
You learn these things though over time,
You do.
It's cool. Excellent. So just jumping into kind of like the current situation a little bit with the pandemic and all that, I know that what, I can't remember now, was it 5-6 weeks ago? They had the Quarantine Backyard Ultra. And for anybody that's not familiar with this, the Backyard Ultra is a certain type of race format where you have to run 4.167 miles every hour, and you have to get back to your starting corral, and then you have as much time as you want to get aid from your, whoever's there or yourself, eat some food, drink something. And as soon as the top of the hour strikes, you have to go back out and do the same thing again, 4.167 miles. And you just keep doing this as long as you can. And it's a last runner standing format. Everyone else DNFs. There's only one person who finishes generally, unless I guess if they both decide not to go out on that last lap, maybe. But anyway, Kelly and I did this race. It was called the Quarantine Backyard Ultra. We were in our own areas doing this on our own courses, and there were 2,000 people all over the world. So I just wanted to just find out from you, Kelly, like, were you just inspired to do that because there were no other races going on? You needed something to kind of like just challenge yourself. Had you ever done that format before? Is it something you're interested in doing?
So I guess to the last part, I'm doing the format before. I'd done approximately that format. There's a 4 mile per hour challenge that's up at, well, it used to be around Whiskeytown until it all burned up last year. That they put up on there for the last couple of years, and I had done it 2 or 3 times. But the format was a little different. That it was every 90 minutes you were doing 6 miles, and it was a out and back format, which was fun, but it was different than how they're starting to, standardize around this 4.167. Which I don't know if I'm the only person who had not realized, because I didn't realize until I hit 25 miles that the whole reason was to round out the mileage to exactly hit 100.
Right. Yeah, I'm not
so
sure
that there
I
was
knew
a
either.
purpose for that 1.67.
Right.
But this was the first time I had done just that as the 1 hour loops. And, I had kind of been down on these kind of course setups and 1 hour challenges, but I had a lot of fun. I was realizing as we set up the Zoom tonight that I've never took my race number off my Zoom, because I think that's the last time I'd made a Zoom call.
Great. Nice.
So
I was wondering what the number was for it.
Yeah, that was my quarantine ultra number.
Yeah. Yeah, we were all on this big shared Zoom sessions.
Yeah, but it was a great format. I think I could really get behind doing it live, because to go probably longer than 60 miles, it'd be nice to have people out there with you when you were doing it. But I'm really into sort of the strategy of racing, and to hear people kind of talk about sort of when to eat and how to take breaks and how to rest if you were going to do, go beyond one evening and into the next day, because I've certainly not taken that on, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I set up my schedule so maybe I can take on one to push into the following day and see how I do.
I was thinking while I was doing mine, like you did 60 miles, I did I think you did like 100K, right? Or essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did a 50K, and I was thinking as I was doing it, doing this thing in person with other people on the same course with you would have to be a very like psychological, strategic type of race, because you all come back to that corral, you're off doing your own little things, and you're kind of maybe checking out people, like how's that person looking, how are they going to go on another lap, what am I doing? I was thinking it would be possibly like that, in person.
It was certainly fun with the format that they did, and I think Personal Peak is now set up like 3 or 4 all summer long, but they had Courtney, who was on telling a joke every hour at 52 minutes after the hour. So it gave you a nice incentive to make it back by minute 52, so you could hear what the dumb joke of the hour was.
Yeah.
They found a way to make it a lot of fun.
It was. And I mean, I'll tell you, like I was watching the live feed practically the rest of the weekend.
I did too.
And I mean, just to fill in people, I mean, there were people on treadmills all over the world. There was one guy running laps inside of a coffee shop in northern Alberta, if I remember correctly, in his socks. I mean, and he went long. Like he was, I think, over 40 hours, maybe, or around 40 hours.
Wow.
Something incredible.
I think the woman in the woman in Sweden or whatever that was running
Oh
on some ice
yes,
lake or something
she was
for.
running outside on an ice lake. Yeah, I mean, it was just incredible, like to see all these different venues and viewpoints and all that. So, yeah, there's another one I noticed. I went on their site today. They have one scheduled for July 11th. So if anybody is interested in trying a backyard ultra format, go to quarantinebackyardultra.com and it's free. It's free. I mean, the first one was free. The second one's free. And it's just kind of an interesting format. And it's really a very mental type of race, I would imagine. Like, did you have a preset number of laps, or were you just kind of, deciding every lap?
I had kind of had it in my mind, since I couldn't do canyons, that I wanted to get 100K. So 100K was kind of in my mind. It must have completely been in my mind about potentially going overnight, because when I mentioned it to my family after I was done, they're like, "What? You were going to go till tomorrow?" So there was a bit of a stretch goal, but yeah, I don't know if you guys remember that day. It was just pouring rain here, and I had set it up around the farm roads.
Yep.
And so I had like 2 miles on asphalt and 2 miles on farm roads, and I'd get about a mile into those farm roads and have about 2 inches of clay on the bottom of my shoes. So I do like 100 yards, scrape my shoes down, 100 yards, scrape my shoes down, and I finally switched courses the last 3 laps, and then I'm like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I was wondering how some people would put a limit to themselves, because honestly, like, at least people with kids, it's like, you can't, oh, I'm gonna sign up for a backyard ultra. I'm gonna go for as long as I can. Yeah, your family's gonna tell you for how long you're gonna go. It's it's like, okay, well, we'll go to bed at 7 as long as you're done by 6 a.m. It's yes, So yeah, but I do think that the whole format is really interesting. I am excited to see these new challenges are coming out, whether it is a across the Tennessee or the backyard ultra, because it is keeping people active. It is keeping people on their toes. It is keeping people motivated, right? And with that, we were reading that you usually use races to to as a training block to train you for something bigger,
Yeah.
right? It's and now that there are no races, it's other than the backyard ultra, and you couldn't do canyons. There's no Western States. Um, you know, how are you handling all of that? Are you still running outside out of these big backyard ultras, or you just taking it easy and, hey, you know what? Western States is not coming until 2021. I guess I have until February to start training.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I probably live in fear at this point of stopping running, that if I stopped for too long, it would be too hard to fight to get back. So that keeps me at a base level.
Yeah.
But, I had talked to friends a couple weeks after we got into this, and I'm like, the races are gone. I run for the beauty of the outdoors, and that's while I'm out there. And then I think I think two things. One, I think the first weekend we started doing the stay in place orders, etc. I had gone down to the headlands to just run the muck course on my own, and I did it that weekend, the weekend before they shut down the headlands. And I thought, yeah, I'll go out early. My time is not going to be when the majority of people are going to be out here. And I hit Tennessee Valley about halfway through my run. Actually, I hit Muir Beach before that, and it was insane. And people in groups, and by the time I got to Tennessee Valley, it was even worse. It was worse than a race weekend. So it really kind of turned me off to, what am I going to do with this whole thing? So I adjusted to kind of put my long runs on Fridays. I've got the at least flexibility in my schedule that I can do that. And then I'm running a lot less. I do my one day that I sneak into Auburn on Fridays. And other than that, I've had to take it down quite a bit. So, I had mentioned to friends, like I said, that the beauty of the outdoors would be enough. I think I underestimated just the impact of the anxiety of the whole situation and what that would have on just sort of taking away energy I had for putting in long weeks and things like that. So I've certainly not been putting in the kind of weeks that I would have put in to say that I'm race ready for Western.
Mhm.
But I think I've been able to at least keep kind of a base level of running.
Yeah, sounds like a familiar story. I mean, I know I'm sort of in the same boat. I've been doing some longer runs, but I'm kind of just thinking about, trying to do little efforts here and there, but just maintain fitness, as much as possible.
Yeah.
And hopefully at some point, I mean, like we've been talking about, some of these virtual races do provide a little motivation, so that's helpful too.
Yeah, I mean, the creativity's been awesome. Paolo, I will give a shout out for your 100 idea. I think
Oh, thank you.
that is awesome. So, I'm going to be in there as well. But, I think with the vertical challenges that Jamil and their group's been putting together, and with some of these other races with Personal Peak and some of the 4-hour challenges, I think there's just some cool concepts. I have been tracking my way across Tennessee too. So
Yeah, me too.
So just so you know, we will have a special award for anybody that does 100 miles in a single day. So, just letting you know.
Something to think about.
It's just
I
letting you
started
know.
plotting in my mind when I was running on Sunday. I'm like, well, if I start at my house and if I run to Squaw Valley,
There you go.
Olympic Valley.
Olympic Valley.
Right. So switching gears a little bit, I definitely want to get into a couple of the big things you've been doing to let some people know here. So just to give everybody a little bit of an intro, in 2017, Kelly ran the Grand Slam of Ultrarunning. And what this is, it's 4 races. And I can't remember if it's 5 and you get to choose 4, or you can correct me, but I'll just say which ones you ran. And so this includes Western States, Vermont 100, Leadville, and Wasatch 100. And if I'm not mistaken, these are done pretty much within like a month of each other in sequence. So we're talking 400s in, month to month, like over a period of 4 months. And I just gotta shout out, you've placed 3rd overall in the field of people who did the Grand Slam and finished in a total elapsed time of 4 races, 100 milers, mind you, not easy ones, in 96 hours and change, under 100 hours elapsed. Huge open-ended question, like what was that like? And I guess the other question is kind of like, how did you decide to do that? What got you interested in doing that? And how did you just pull something like that off?
Let's see which one to take on first. So one, maybe going back a little bit behind it, which is I had decided about a year before that I needed to switch things up, and I had quit my job. So I was pretty much focused on running for about 2 years. And so that was kind of a pivotal point in terms of kind of resetting priorities and what I wanted to focus on. And I think at the point that I knew about it and that I got into Western, it was also at the point that I was talking to people that were saying there are really not many chances to do this. And if you get into Western, then, if you want to go for it, now's the time to go for it. So at that point, the big challenge was that Leadville was also a bit difficult to get into. Like you said, there's now 5 races that you have to get 4 of. And, I had paced on the Wasatch course the year before, so I knew at least a little bit of what I was getting into there. And since I had run Western once before, kind of knew what I was getting into there. So I felt like I could put together a training plan. And, it's part of what I get into is to kind of push the envelope a little bit and see if it's possible. And so I was super fortunate to have a good team that was working with me with both, pacers and crew and just friends that were giving me information and advice. And, I trained my ass off for Western that year. And, I had some friends that were working with me on my nutrition plan, and I got that dialed in, and just things just came together so much better than I could have even imagined. So it was a matter that just, like as Paolo was saying, I used a number of build-up races with AR50 and with canyons, and all of the races were going better than I expected, and I was running strong. So it just each one built on it and built my confidence. By the time that I got to Western, I was able to pull off beyond what I expected there. And then I knew from that point, and really as people had told me going into it, train for Western and then just recover your way and hang on through the rest of it. And I will tell you, by the time I got to Wasatch, it was 30 hours on that course, and I was hanging on to get to that finish line.
That sounds brutal. Yeah.
So, Kelly, I got a question about 2017 Western States, because I've got to tell you, there are times that I wake up in the middle of the night sweating from this dream that you're passing me by on Kyle Street. It's we Martin following along, and I'm just shuffling, right? It's and I never make it to the finish line in my dream. It's but when you passed us, it's you were moving great, but the first 30 miles of that race were completely miserable. I mean, it's from Olympic Valley, not Squaw Valley. It's to Robinson Flat. It was just a mess. Were you prepared for that? Did you bring it down a notch because of the snow, or do you fight through the course? Like in my case, I fought through the course, and the course won. Uh, what was your experience?
So I think a couple of things really helped. One, I think because I was a skier and because I'd spent so much time in snow, that I actually had a blast on the top part of that course. We had gone up and we had worked the aid station at Broken Arrow a couple weeks before. So I had been able to kind of test drive which shoes I wanted to use on the mountain a couple weeks before. I had already set up and left myself a set of shoes at Red Star because I knew my shoes were going to be soaked by the time I got out of Red Star. And like I said, well, and we'd also, I've gone, I think we did that year. We've gone over the top pretty much every year with a group of people. So I'm pretty, was pretty comfortable leading folks through the snow. So, once we dropped off the other side of Watson Monument, I was just barreling down the hill and just having a blast. And so by the time we got into Red Star, switched shoes, and I was out of the snow, we were off and running, and yeah, things were great.
Right.
Awesome. And I think that started a mental game for me that just played out the entire race, because it just wasn't, I wasn't behind times. I also, probably the other thing that plays into it is my hardest point on that race is getting to Robinson, actually climbing out from, when am I blanking on the aid station before Robinson?
Duncan Canyon.
From Duncan Canyon is where I always have the hardest time. So sort of once I get past there, I always feel better.
Okay.
Nice. Well, we've got so many questions here. I know we got to be mindful of time. I mean, I would love to dig into so much more about the Grand Slam and all that, but I really do want to make sure that we also touch on another race you did the following year. So let me just share a little screenshot here. And hope you all can see that picture right there.
Shout out to Scott Rokas for some amazing photography skills.
Yeah, Now, if anybody's not familiar, and probably most people wouldn't be, or unless they've done some research, what race is this? What's going on here? What's going through your mind?
This would be the finish line at Homewood for Tahoe 200.
This is in 2018, right?
Yes.
Okay. And who are you seeing there at the finish line as this picture is being taken?
I think my family and my crew are all there thanks to my crew chief who was on top of things at the top of that hill at the last aid station, making sure they all woke up.
Yeah. And your time for that race, 8th place overall, 69 hours, 21 minutes, which for anyone that doesn't know, the Tahoe 200 has a 100-hour time limit. So this is a very significant finish, very fast. What was that experience like? I mean, I know people tell us, or I've heard, and I've been up there. I was up there last year crewing for a couple people. It's just a different type of beast than a 100 miler. And did you find that to be the case?
Definitely found that to be the case. It was, that year was an interesting season. So I had gone back for some unfinished business on TRT right before that, and had what in my mind was a horrible race. But, luckily having some good people around me that, clearly, let me know that it may not have been the race I wanted, but it was the race I needed. It really sort of cemented in my mind what I knew, that, I'm at heart a hiker, and a strong hiker. So, I spent the next 6 weeks up around Tahoe, just doing sections of the trail, making sure that I knew, making sure I knew what my times would be. And, I think, again, this one goes back to the fact that I was able to put together an awesome crew who just took care of me the entire race. So I could minimize what I was carrying. And, my friend Andrea had her expedition, which she strategically parked at a couple places so I could get a couple hours sleep. I remember Sean Flanagan and I were in the last stretch coming through the Rubicon, and we were passing a guy, and his pacer was like, "We're not sure we can get to the next aid station because my runner hasn't slept and he's delirious and not sure we're going to get there." And I'd slept, 5 hours at that point, and I was tired, but I wasn't delirious. So I think, certainly what fed into that was doing a lot of strategic planning. I had, a couple of friends who'd done it the year before, so I worked off a lot of their data to try and put the whole race plan together, and it worked. So, and that last section was Sean paced me for 100K through the Rubicon, and I just, when you've got folks who will do that kind of stuff for you to drag you through and suck dust for an entire night, it's pretty amazing to have. And that's at the end of the day, the thing with this entire community is that it just continues to amaze me that everybody gives that kind of support to everyone else, to be able to, so we can pull these things off.
Yeah, that's the best part. And I've heard stories about the Rubicon and just the dust and just everything. It's just kind of miserable, I think. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's beautiful out there, but I was thankful that we were doing the clockwise loop. We were doing the opposite of the way it normally runs, and so we were pretty much out there by ourselves, which usually the other way is it's the start of the race. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine being out there when you got herd of buffalo running through the powdery dust.
No doubt. Just an absolutely impressive performance, and it really sounds like one of the keys to your success is just that whole idea of planning it out. I mean, whether it's at the race level or for the Grand Slam at the macro level, you're kind of planning out each race as a sequence. So you've got the whole plan for the several months. I know from my experiences when I don't plan well, and that's fairly often, things just start happening like that you don't want to happen. So it's nice to eliminate all those gotchas and those unexpected things. And it sounds like you've had a really successful time doing that.
Well, I guess let's be honest that it's been through a lot of failures and trying to learn from those failures and put a little bit more planning into the next one. So yeah, but I do like the strategy.
That's
I
great.
think that's the whole point of this interview series, right? To share the knowledge and the experience with other runners, right? It's from everything from the beginning of this interview with you when you said that it takes years to build endurance. And I remember hearing that when I first got into trail running, when I first got into triathlon actually, and thinking, years, what are you talking about? But no, it takes years because it's not just about the time I spent on the trail or the time I spent on the bike, but it's a recovery time. And it's a time that it takes you, it's the mindset, right? Like you learn that it's more than just your body, but it's your mind that eventually gets you through that journey, whatever it is. It's 100 miles, 200 miles, or a marathon or a half marathon, because every one of those small increments, it's in its own, all of it, right? It's so yeah, no, it's your mind plays a big role there, right? And getting the right people, like you say, having the right crew is key, right? Because you just, you couldn't get to the finish line otherwise.
Nope. I remember vividly in 2017 of catching up with Martin at the bottom of Bath Road and being it was just this elation of sort of getting to the next phase of the race. And yeah.
Oh, it was a beautiful moment.
Folks in your court.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've covered some things. I mean, I've got so many more questions that I wrote, but I know we have to be mindful. But I do want to, if we have some time, just fit in some audience Q&A as well. So I think we've got Mike Turner. He's been helping out, monitoring everything for us. Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, we had some good questions from the audience. Adam actually has some questions here. Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, Kelly, I'm Adam. Nice to meet you. I don't think we've met before. I live here in Auburn. But I actually have a question, and thank you for sharing your story. First, it's a very cool story, inspirational story, and I learned a lot. But my question has nothing to do with running. It has to do with two words you said at the very beginning of your talk: single-handed sailing.
I was thinking of you.
I prior to moving up to Auburn, I spent about a decade racing up and down the coast of California and competing primarily big boat.
Oh yeah.
But I'm just always full crew. I'm just curious, what your sailing experience was. Was it lake? Was it ocean? Was it big boat? Was it small boat? Was it long distance, short distance?
Small boat, international class lasers.
Okay.
And then some Hobie, but not a lot. I didn't race the Hobies much either. We had it. We had one for a number of years, but mostly racing the lasers.
Okay, very cool. Very cool.
So Adam, there is your crew for the Hobie Cat you haven't taken out.
Yeah, so I happen to have a Hobie Cat sitting in my front yard. So
oh yeah,
if you're ever interested in sailing around in Folsom or something, let me know.
I can tell you a story about pitch poling one on Eagle Lake.
Oh, there you go. Did you turtle?
Oh yeah. No, I've done some spectacular failures on a sailboat.
Yeah. Well, sailing can be summed up of like 95% of it you're actually kind of bored. And the other, 5 to 10% of it, you're hoping you live through the moment.
Indeed. Yeah, it's fun times. Yeah, I'd go out anytime.
Very cool. Very cool.
Hey, so guys, the next question is from Brian. He has some questions about racing in dark times.
So basically, I know you've gone on some pretty good adventures. Basically, in a race, what's the darkest moment you've been through that you've been able to pull out of? And just kind of, you know, what were you thinking? How did you get through it? And what did you learn?
When I went back to run TRT in 2018, I had injured myself a couple weeks before and kind of toned things down. And then my training was looking really good. And somehow I got this crazy idea that I was back in race shape to pull off, you know, sub 24, sub 25 on that course. And so I did the first loop and I was probably 40 miles into it, and then things were starting to slow down pretty dramatically. And I got into that infamous second loop, as Paolo calls it. And you just kind of got to take stock in sort of where you're at in the race. So I think at the point that a couple of my friends passed me, I was in Marlette Lake floating around on my back, just kind of watching the sky and relaxing for a little bit, trying to realize what I wanted to do next, and decided I wanted to finish the race. So, you know, got cooled down, got back out and started plugging away. Now that didn't solve it. You know, I probably went into the aid station at Diamond Peak and I whined to Helen and Jack Meyer for about 20 minutes on, you know, how shitty my race was going. And luckily I had some people that said, suck it up, Kelly, and get back out there on the course because you're doing just fine. And then I kicked my can all the way to the finish line. And so I will tell you that the turning point in that race is that I finished better than I did the first year I did that race. And I was pouting the entire way down Snow Valley Peak. And I didn't learn my lesson until probably a few weeks later, when I realized I'd never wanted to do that again, that I had to be, you know, I had to realize how fortunate I was to be out there. And it really didn't matter what the finish time was. So I think as I went into CIM that year, it changed my entire outlook for my marathon, that it didn't matter. If I was having a shitty day, I was going to enjoy myself because I could still be doing it. And so I think I've certainly had sort of down points in races to just dig myself out of it. And I'm not worried about getting to the finish line because I'm just stubborn that way. I'm going to get to the finish line. But I think that race kind of taught me just to be happy about, just to be enjoyable about being out there.
Yeah, such a good lesson for anybody.
Yeah, it was a little bit difficult, but tried to cheer people as they're passing me down Snow Valley Peak. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was a good lesson learned.
Awesome. Hey, thank you. That was it for me.
Mike, do we have anyone else ask questions?
Yeah, Jessica has a question. You there, Jessica?
Yes. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Jessica.
Hi. I'm such a fan, obviously. My question is about what you run in. I remember you coming into Dusty Corners and you had the button down all the way unbuttoned and you had your hand held. So tell me, how did you get into wearing the button downs? Because I think they're super cool.
In 2017, I think one of the things that I decided was that I think there was two things. I think I had talked to a couple of people about sort of what was the best way to stay cool, and there was a lot of folks that were kind of going to cotton and something cotton related, and I felt like at least with the button down, I could take it off and throw it in the creek and put it back on and get cool that way. And that was easier than some sort of, you know, Jim Walmsley cut up t-shirt. So I went with that. And then the other piece was just once I decided to get rid of the pack, and especially with Western's course of the aid stations being so close together, I figured it would be cooler to run with bottles than run with a full pack, and that paid off there. It bit me in the ass at Wasatch, but at least for Western and for Vermont, it worked great to at least minimize the amount of stuff I was carrying. Now I'm super whiny if I have to carry my pack, because I'd much rather just run with bottles. But I haven't picked out my button down for this year. I was all set to do that when Western canceled, so I got to figure a new one for next year.
Well, we have decided in the chat that every Thursday is button down Thursday. We're all gonna wear a button down Thursday. So
I almost grabbed the flamingos, but I figured they were looking a little too dressy, so I toned it down a bit.
well, Brian was asking in the chat too, I don't think any of the buttons would chafe or anything. They're like clips. They're not real buttons.
No, I went to the Pearl Snaps last year. Actually, it was a I can't remember if Helen or I got to the decision first, but if you've ever been 80 miles into a race and trying to button a button, your brain doesn't work that well. So the snaps are great for when your brain's not working. And no, they don't chafe.
Nice.
Excellent. Anything else, Mike?
I don't see any more questions in here.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap things up then. I just really want to thank you, Kelly, for spending this time with us, a little over an hour here, and just going through some of the great things that you've done, sharing some insights and, ideas about how you've gotten through some of these huge undertakings and just sort of your progression. It's been really impressive to me. And I'm looking forward to towing the line again at one of these races at some point. And,
Me too.
I know we all can't wait to get out there, and that's sort of the idea here, is to just keep us all kind of motivated and hear these great stories. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, my last one got killed last week, so yeah, I guess I got to wait for 21 now.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to blow the horn so the race starts again. I know. It's I feel like we eventually need to do a Kelly Barber episode 2.0, because there's so many questions that are still out there. So
I think we got through half of them.
Yeah, this has been a blast. I'm more than willing to come back and chat anytime. And I will certainly be participating.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you. Yes. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us again. This is your co-host Paulo Medina, broadcasting from Auburn, California. Today was sunny and beautiful here. It's wash your hands and enjoy yourself. Yeah, Greg, go ahead.
All right, everybody. Thanks again. And we'll just announce right now, she's on the call right now, Karen Bonet. She's going to be our next guest next Thursday. So
Karen,
get ready for that. And we'll be talking to her and also finding out what makes her tick. So looking forward to that in 1 week's time.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, Karen is another really fountain of information, from anything from running to triathlon to Ultraman. We are definitely going to dig deep there and learn a lot about Karen and about
You
how
crazy
to
woman.
get through a lot of things in life. Yes. Yeah.
All right. We'll see you all then. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks all.
All right.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.